Hey everybody, it's time to Nefis and chill. I've been asked by quite a lot of people if I could make a vampire heavy attack build, or some sort of vampire build, specifically for PvE. And I actually tested this over a couple weeks, and this is pretty much what I got, what you'll see in the video. And I got interested in this because I think as a vampire, you do definitely have a few unique options to utilize on a typical one-bar Oakensword build, and I managed to get a potential of about 90k DPS with this vampire heavy attack build. And this build can be used for a variety of content, including world bosses in Overland, solo arenas such as VMA, veteran dungeons, and of course veteran trials. So the recommended races I would go with this actually is probably going to be Khajiit, High Elf, or Dark Elf. For solo or forming content, Khajiit will have an advantage. And honestly, I've been liking Khajiit more and more for some reason recently, especially for the latter case, because you don't get that unique source of crit damage in smaller groups in forming content or by yourself, even with medium armor pieces on. And most likely, for solo and forming content, you'll probably want to wear Noble Duelist Silk. The dummy parts you'll see in this video was done with Stormmaster for update 38, post Stormmaster nerf. So it's still fine to use in organized group settings and even on dummy. However, I'd still go with Noble Duelist Silk for overland and solo instances and stuff like that, or even forming content. Mundus Stone will be the thief. You can have bystat food such as Mistral Banana Bunny Hash that gives you max health and max magicka. And yes, you are a vampire. At what stage you're a vampire doesn't really matter too much. I would definitely say stage 3 or above is fine, considering you do get the undeath passive, which will help mitigate damage at your low health thresholds if you do dip low. And I would recommend using the Essence of Health Resistances potion. Gives you health back immediately while giving you major fortitude, but also more importantly, increases your spell and physical resistances by 5,280 for 47.6 seconds. And this is a unique amount of resistances, which will stack with things like Major Resolve and your other armor buffs. And that's really it. For the gear setup, you will have something like basically the same thing as the other one-bar builds. You got Sergeant's Mail on 1 bar and jewelry, Bloodthirsty on the jewelry. The only thing I would honestly say is different from prior heavy attack builds is the choice of enchantments. So both spell damage and physical damage enchantments for jewelry give you weapon and spell damage glyphs. So it doesn't really matter which one you pick. However, if you want an additional 30 stamina recovery, go with physical harm enchantments. If you want an additional 30 magicka recovery, you'll go with spell harm enchantments. And it's not too big of a deal, but if you want to optimize, go for it. And of course, as said on the gear setup, you can do Noble Duelist or Stormmaster, depending on the scenarios I listed beforehand in the video. And all the traits will be Divine, Magic Enchantments, if you want, Precise with Lightning Staff, and Flame Enchantment as well. Another alternative body piece body set can be 5-piece Order's Wrath if you don't have Noble Duelist or Stormmaster. In terms of your primary skill bar setup, it's going to look like this: Exhilarating Drain, Barb Trap, Daedric Prey, Summon Volatile Familiar, Summon Twilight Tormentor, and Greater Storm Atronach. I'll kind of talk here about the experiments I did. So the usage of Exhilarating Drain, which not only heals you for 25% of your missing health and generates 5 ultimate every 1 second for 3 seconds, which is a unique amount, by the way, which is why it's so strong. Exhilarating Drain, it can be a little finicky, as I found it best to cancel out the full channel when you immediately get your ultimate, rather than letting the skill finish even after you get your ultimate. It's going to feel a little weird at first, but it'll make sense as you play around with it. This is necessary as time is precious for DPS, and going several global cooldowns without a Storm Atronach ultimate or a Shooting Star ultimate can be a loss of damage for you. And while the Vampiric skill itself is a decent heal, if you need additional healing, you can actually switch the Twilight Tormentor to Twilight Matriarch for actual content. And I did test both morphs of Mistform, and the Elusive Mistform seems to honestly be the better choice in terms of the combat feel of it in terms of also positioning and mobility, especially for a build that doesn't really have too much mobility or innate mobility, especially while you're heavy attacking. And the healing from Blood Mist seems rather negligible after a bit of testing. And honestly, if you want a good passive heal, Critical Surge is infinitely better than Blood Mist is. I also experimented, apart from Exhilarating Drain, as a semi-spammable, with Simmering Frenzy as a passive weapon and spell damage gain, along with Blood for Blood spammable from the Vampire Scale line. And in theory, Simmering Frenzy does work well with this build due to the amount of health you have. You have almost 30k health. However, it seems to trail behind Exhilarating Drain, at least on a single target basis. And Blood for Blood seemed really underwhelming in terms of the damage done compared to just getting more ultimate and casting more ults. So it was pretty interesting to test this build. I'm glad that you guys requested this because I found it kind of fun to test and play around with some of the concepts of Vampire and its passives and some of the active skills I saw fit to use along with the gear setup for a typical 1-bar build. In terms of the champion points, we do have the typical Oaken Sword Warfare slottables. We have Backstabber, Deadly Aim, Weapons Expert, Exploiter. If you can't flank an enemy, always go with Fighting Finesse instead of Backstabber. Fitness slottables will vary. I would definitely recommend Celerity, Balanced Vitality as like the two most important slottables for fitness. You can go instead of Bastion, Expert Evasion, or instead of Bastion or Expert Evasion, you can go with something else that might help you sustain survival in a fight. So, for example, a Free Break Free, something like that. Rotation here is basically the same as the Oaken Sword rotation. You first want to pre-buff with your pets. You activate your Twilight Tormentor, Volatile Familiar, and then cast your Storm Atronach away from the target so you don't hit it with that Storm Atronach. And then you start pretty much channeling into your rotation after you cast a Barbed Trap, which activates after a delay on the target. And you want a heavy attack channel into a Daedric Prey, and then you basically want to weave your Exhilarating Drain as much as possible to get more ultimates as often as possible. You'll notice here throughout this video that I do cancel out the Exhilarating Drain at times, depending on what may be down. So, since my pets do a big chunk of my damage in addition to my heavy attacks, it's only natural that I would probably, prioritize the Daedric Prey over maybe another 2-3 seconds of Exhilarating Drain. And so you'll see me cancel it out or just let it ride out depending on the dot timers. Surprisingly, it can be a little dynamic because of the nature of Exhilarating Drain. So this is something you kind of have to feel out for yourself. And as you can see, I just stopped immediately casting Exhilarating Drain when the Storm Atronach comes up. So if I am casting Exhilarating Drain and my ultimate is up right as that animation is starting, I'm going to cancel it out with a block or something, and then immediately cast my Storm Atronach ulti. I did test Shooting Star versus Storm Atronach ulti, and in theory, while the Shooting Star would net me more ultimate gain due to the fact that it does give ultimate back per target hit, I think it's probably better single target wise to do the Storm Atronach ulti after I did a few tests, because the Storm Atronach ulti is quite a lot of single target damage. I think the Meteor, if you're going to use it for funsies, I think definitely use it on areas where there's like 2 or more things. So if there's 2 or more bosses, use it on them. If there's a big trash pack, use it on them. And you'll see a lot of ulti generation from using Exhilarating Drain and Meteor, which will lead to more meteors and more damage, basically. I've also think this is going to be a really fun build for dungeons. I did test a couple times in PTS, and I think the ulti gain is kind of ridiculous. And the survivability is really nice. And again, survivability will depend on whether you want to slot out Barbed Trap for Critical Surge, or even swap out Twilight Tormentor for Twilight Matriarch. Although I would definitely prefer using the Critical Surge over the Twilight Matriarch, especially in solo instances, because you have to kind of sacrifice GCDs or global cooldowns to cast that Twilight Matriarch heal. And Critical Surge may just be the better passive heal option instead, in combination with Exhilarating Drain. And of course, if you watch a little bit more of this video. At the end, I'll show a kill on the world boss, one of a few kills I did on the same boss. And I just kind of use Mistform to move around a bit, and surprisingly, it's really fun to also move around and just kind of mitigate all that damage incoming. So yeah, thanks for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoy it. Definitely do like and subscribe to the channel if you want to support us, and I'll see you guys next time.